The transition of Philippine government to self-rule was soon interrupted, as the World War II emerged. As one of the American colonies in the Pacific, the Philippines became a war front in Asia. Our country soon fell to Japanese forces, thus starting the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. The Japanese military administration was established in Manila on January 3, 1942. It announced the end of American occupation in the Philippines. The Japanese also sought the cooperation of Filipino politicians in administering the country. In line with this, they established the Philippine Executive Commission. The Japanese appointed prominent Filipinos in PEC. This includes George Vargas as the chairman. The commission exercised both executive and legislative powers. The Japanese military administration later on attempted to foster greater collaboration with Filipinos all over the country. It established the Kalabapi to recruit Filipinos into government service. The Kalabapi was tasked to form an independence commission and prepare a draft constitution. In October 14, 1943, the Japanese-sponsored republic, then known as the Second Philippine Republic, was inaugurated with Jose P. Laurel as president. As president, Laurel sought to prevent further atrocities from being committed on the Philippines, and bring vital services to citizens. In 1944, the Allied forces saw a resurgence against the Axis power. The Allied powers defeated the Japanese Imperial Navy in Leyte Gulf. This paved the way for the return of the Americans in the Philippines. The Japanese forces were eventually defeated and driven out of the country. The Second Republic came to an end with the surrender of the Japanese in September 2, 1945, thus re-establishing the Philippine Commonwealth in the country. How did historical developments influence the growth and evolution of Philippine politics and governance? Philippine independence was fully realized when the United States officially proclaimed on July 4, 1946. A new Republican, democratic government was established, modeling itself to the provisions stated in the 1935 Constitution. The first president after the colonial years of the Philippines was Manuel Rojas. The main focus of his administration was the rehabilitation of our country, because of the damages brought by the war. One of the greatest challenges to the Rojas government was the growth of socialist and communist groups. His presidency was short-lived, as he died on April 15, 1948, 1 year, 10 months, and 18 days after he was inaugurated as the president. 2 days after the death of Manuel Rojas, Elpidio Quirino took the oath as the President of the Philippines. Under his administration, Lazadaco was established to help landless farmers. He also initiated a campaign to address government corruption and restore public trust in the administration. Quirino's administration also sought to restore peace and order, by negotiating with the Huk rebels. In 1953, following his failed bid for re-election, he retired from public service. In the election of 1953, Ramon Magsaysay was decisively elected president against the incumbent Elpidio Quirino. He was known as the man of the masses, as he tried to bring the government closer to the people. It was during his term that the Huk rebellion brought to an end. As part of his agrarian reform, the administration established NARA, or the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration, to give 65,000 acres of land to 3,000 indigent families. The Philippines became a firm partner of the United States in combating the spread of communism in the Asian region. His term was cut short when he died in a plane crash on March 16, 1957, 9 months before the official end of his tenure. Magsaysay's untimely death elevated his vice president, Carlos P. Garcia, into the presidency. His administration pushed for nationalist programs like Filipino First policy, which aimed at fostering economic independence by extending privileges and assistance to Filipino entrepreneurs. In 1961, he ran for re-election, but was defeated by Diosdado Macapagal. Diosdado Macapagal succeeded Garcia in 1961, and his administration tackled the issue of economic development by decentralizing economic controls. He also signed into law the Land Reform Code of 1963, which abolished the tenancy system and established a leasehold system. Another notable action of his administration was the recognition of June 12 as the official Independence Day in honor of the Declaration of Independence, held in 1898. In 1965, Ferdinand Marcos opposed the re-election of Diosdado Macapagal by switching his allegiance to the rival party of the former, the Nacionalista Party. In that year, he won the elections. Before his presidency, the Philippines was the second largest economy in Asia, just behind Japan. Marcos pursued an aggressive program of infrastructure development, funded by foreign funds. This would lead to an inflationary crisis, which would lead to social unrest that would continue in his second term. Many people started protesting in Marcos' second term. These protests would lead to Proclamation No. 1081, on September 21, 1972, which placed the country under martial law. This marked the beginning of a 14-year period of one-man rule. This period was known to be a dark one in our history, as human rights violation was rampant. It would effectively last until Marcos was exiled from the country on February 25, 1986. He was succeeded by the wife of his political adversary, Corazon Aquino. Corazon Aquino was the first woman president in our country. In her presidency, the administration restored the democracy and released the political prisoners from martial law. It was also in her term that the 1987 Constitution was ratified and inaugurated. Corazon Aquino was succeeded by Fidel Ramos, her chief of staff. Philippines 2000, a socio-economic program of his administration, was widely successful, as it is focused on economic restorations, and able to open the then-closed Philippine economy, and demonopolized many services given by the private companies such as PLDT and PAO. Joseph Estrada served as the 13th President of the Philippines. His administration declared an all-out war against MILF, after the latter violated the conditions stated in the peace negotiations with the former administration. President Estrada was also stained by corruption allegations, and this would lead to an impeachment procedure against him. He was ousted in People Power II, on January 20, 2001. After Joseph Estrada was ousted, his vice president, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, assumed the presidential powers. She made the Philippine economy the focus of her presidency. According to National Economic and Development Authority figures, the gross domestic product during her administration was higher, compared to her predecessors. She also focused on higher tax collection, as the expanded value-added tax was implemented. Her administration faced some challenges in terms of corruption, as Arroyo herself was involved in electoral sabotage in 2004 presidential elections, and misuse of public funds. GMA was succeeded by Benigno Noynoy Aquino III, son of the late President Corazon Aquino. He served as the 16th President of the Philippines. In his administration, he vowed to end the corruptions, as his predecessor was famous for that one. He created the Truth Commission, to investigate the corruption allegations of the former administration. He also signed the Republic Act No. 10533, or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, that gave way to the implementation of K-12 curriculum. His administration also supported the Reproductive Health Bill, that created a rift between him and the Catholic Church. At the end of his term, he faced criticisms for his involvement and evading responsibility for Mamasapano massacre that killed the SAF 44. Rodrigo Duterte assumed the presidential powers after he won in the last 2016 national elections. He was the first president from Mindanao, and the former Davao mayor. He was famous for promising the eradication of illegal drugs in the country, coined as the War on Drugs. He also signed a law that cuts the red tape practices in the Philippines. At the same time, the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, or the TRAIN law, was signed into law. It lowers the personal income taxes, and increased the taxes imposed on petroleum products, automobiles, and sugar-sweetened beverages. Recently, he also signed the Republic Act No. 11479, or the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. It intends to prevent, prohibit, and penalize terrorism acts in the country, replacing the Human Security Act of 2007. His administration also endorses the transition of our government into federal one. His term will end on 2022. As a student, is it important for the government to uphold human rights and freedom? Why, or why not? The Philippine Constitution has undergone several significant changes that were driven by the political, social, and economic changes our country faced all throughout the history. We had the Biak na Bato and Malolo's Constitution, created by the revolutionary movement, the 1935 Constitution that enabled the establishment of Philippine Commonwealth. We also had the 1943 Constitution, that paved way to the creation of Second Republic. And during the time of Ferdinand Marcos, the 1973 Constitution was formed to facilitate the authoritarian dictatorship. Now, let's discuss our current one, the 1987 Constitution. After the ousting of Ferdinand Marcos, through EDSA People Power Revolution, a revolutionary government was created by her successor, Corazon Aquino. This government promulgated a Freedom Constitution, which contained provisions establishing a transitional government. In line with this, a constitutional committee was formed, to create a new constitution. The 1987 Philippine Constitution was ratified on February 2, 1987, and still serves as the basis of governance in the country up to the present. It is the supreme law of the land, and it is the foundation of all laws in the country. The preamble is the introductory statement that explains the purpose and underlying philosophy of our Constitution. All in all, the 1987 Constitution have 18 articles. The Constitution covers various aspects, such as the national territory, citizenship, suffrage, and the aspects of Philippine democracy. It also states the responsibilities and separation of power of the three branches of the government, namely, executive, legislative, and judicial branch. The 1987 Constitution also provides the creation of the constitutional commissions, such as Civil Service Commission, Commission on Elections, and the Commission on Audit. In your opinion, why is it important for a democratic state to have a Bill of Rights in its constitution? Would you add a new provision to the Bill of Rights? What would this be? And why would you add it?
Happy learning at home with lessons made easy by Olivarian GoTeach. One proud Olivarian.